So I'm going to welcome up Jamila to come and share with us today. So let's all give her a big round of applause.
Sarah, this is my first time. I've been up here in a while. So I'm Jamila Paxima Rowell, and I'm a documentary filmmaker. I am a storyteller by trade, and so I tell stories also as a journalist for television. I've produced a lot of commercials and been a director, but it is my work that I do as a documentary filmmaker where I feel like I am working closely with God's plan for my life. And so today I want to tell you a little bit about some of the projects I've worked on, especially one of the most recent ones. For me, I think it's good for you to know a little bit about my own story. I was born in Iran. My mother is an American, and my father is Iranian and Indian. And we lived in Iran for 14 years, and I had an amazing childhood. It was a beautiful country to live in. I had a great childhood. But then my life dramatically changed at the age of 14 when the revolution started in Iran, and my family had to make a big choice about whether we were staying or going, and it got very scary. And so my family was divided. My father stayed to try to save our home and the businesses, and he sent my mother and my siblings and I to the United States. And we ended up separated for 2 long years, not knowing if he was going to be okay and if he was safe, and things were very unpredictable. And it was during that time, as a teenager, I spent every night watching Nightline with my mother because the Iranian hostage situation was going on at the American embassy in Iran. And that was like chronicled for 444 days. And as I became obsessed with watching news and what was going on in the world and realizing, one part of the world can impact so many people's lives, and that stories had so much power and information had so much power, I started really getting interested in storytelling. And luckily for us, my father was given asylum and came to the United States, and our family was reunited. And by that time, I was ready to make decisions about my career, and I definitely knew I wanted to be a television journalist of some kind, and studied that, got a great job at NBC, starting right at the bottom, answering fan mail after my college degree. But I worked my way up, and I worked for NBC News at Rockefeller Center, and worked with the greats like Tom Brokaw, Jane Pauley, and Maria Shriver, and I worked on a lot of really important projects, and I was there for 11 years, and then the next big thing happened in my life, and that was my mother passed away. And when things like that happen, you get a chance to take a pause in your life and go, okay, what do I want to do? And I spent a lot of time with God and in reflection trying to understand what was my next plan. And very clearly one day, not that it was like a big shock, but I heard him say to me, use your gifts to tell my stories. And with that, I just suddenly had immense confidence that it was time for me to go off on my own to do independent filmmaking, and that I was going to be okay. And from that moment, God just started delivering these stories that I really wanted to tell. They're very hard stories, complicated stories, nuanced, and so it's not like a daily news story, but it's something you need to spend months, weeks, sometimes years putting together. And so began my first big international story of following and chronicling why there's so much child rape in South Africa and what the AIDS pandemic is doing to the continent. And shortly after that, my film started going on PBS. I got the opportunity to travel with President Jimmy Carter and Bill Gates' father around Africa, talking to leaders, in all these African nations about how they were going to handle this pandemic. And I even had the opportunity to go back to Iran. And I went back to Iran with 13 Christian leaders and did a documentary about that. And it's just incredible how each couple of years God would give me another huge project to work on. And so today, the one I want to share with you is more local. And that's kind of a stretch for me because I often jump around the world. And what I recently worked on is a documentary about the hell of homelessness. And we spent almost a year chronicling the lives of 10 men who joined a program in Camden, New Jersey to get off the streets from living on the streets of Camden. And the program is called the Interfaith Homeless Outreach Council. It is a consortium of 24 churches and synagogues that work together to come around just 10 to 12 men a year. They're a select group. And the communities in these churches really wrap around the men. They have counselors, they go to AA and NA meetings, but they really commit as a congregation, in each congregation, to support these people in a very deep way. And so the men actually live in the basement of these churches, and every 2 weeks they move from one location to the other, and along the way they start finding mentors and people to support them. So this is a little bit of an introduction to Camden, homelessness, and this project. Little clip number 1.
I was homeless for 9 months.
I actually been homeless about 10 years.
City of Camden is very dangerous. Everyone deserves a medal just to stay alive here.
I mean, every day it's got to be a challenge. Take a shower, have a meal, carry all your stuff with you. Your feet hurting, raining, snowing.
Now there are 10 of us sitting around, but in war, as we all know, there are casualties.
We're only as sick as our secrets, and a lot of these men bring a lot of secrets.
Drug I was using was heroin. I had to be saved 4 times in the past year. It's an everyday fight with the demons. Every day.
So the thing about being a filmmaker is I can't make films without courageous people telling their stories. And it takes time to win people's trust. And it's one thing to sit and tell somebody's story, it's another to ask them the permission to film it and share it with the whole world. And so in this group of 10 men, there were some of them who were willing to work with me, some were a little more private. And I, as a filmmaker, have to always decide whose stories I'm going to tell. Generally, as I've been doing my work, I've learned that often the people who want to tell their stories right away and are really gung-ho sometimes don't have the most powerful stories. It's actually the people who are quiet, who kind of hide in the back, who have really, sometimes poignant stories to tell. And so in this group of these men, we picked 4 of them to really focus on, but this gentleman at the bottom on the right, Bill Shipp, is the one I'd like to tell you about today. Bill was actually nonverbal when he got to this program. He is 63 years old. He grew up with an alcoholic father, and he spent, like all the men, many years on the street. He was probably on the street longer than anybody in our group. Over close to 20 years is what they think. The thing that really struck me about Bill's story is, as an adult, this man had never had his own room. For his entire life, he had shared a bedroom, a cell, the street with somebody. And he really never had his own space or his own home. And Sonia, who runs the program, said, I don't think he's going to be the one to follow. I don't think he's the one who can really talk and you might want to focus on. But eventually, after this 10-week period at the beginning where they detox and really get cleaned up, Bill started to unfold and he started to talk. And I ended up having the ability to really learn a lot more about who he was. So here's a clip of Bill sharing some of his life story.
The hardest thing in the world. Trying to find a safe place to lay your head. Just trying to survive. That's the part that scares you. You have a chance at life one more time again. Believe me, being homeless and this opportunity here, you want it. It's exciting.
Yes, hi, this is Sonia Jacobs. I'm calling because
We really have been building Mr. Ship since we got him, just trying to put it all together.
Something Sonny's working on is trying to find my family. Tell them I'm all right. They either think I'm locked up or dead. Right there. I was 10, 11 years old when I started drinking. My father, he hit us sometimes, mostly my mother. When he gets drunk, he's very bound. We come home from school, she's up in the room crying. We know what happened. I went to jail for 25 years. Thing went downhill for me.
So about halfway through the program, which is this 6-month program that these men are in, the group of men ended up at one of the churches called Collingswood Baptist Church. And it was at this church that Bill actually found his home church. He found his mentors, 2 women who really took him under their wing and supported him and listened to him, spent like endless hours taking him anywhere he needed to go, to every AA/NA meeting, and really loved him. And suddenly he had decided he was ready to be baptized. And in this program, after 27 years of working with homeless men, he was the first one to be baptized. And it was a massive celebration for him, for his life, for, even for us as the crew. It was a very, very exciting moment. But for Bill, he had, his eye was actually on graduating from the IHOC program, because graduating would mean he finished something in his life. He'd never finished high school. He never finished anything. And this was what he wanted, was because upon graduation, he would have been sober for 6 months, and he would be moving into some kind of a transitional housing situation where he would start to have some independence. And so this is the piece of Bill's story which I feel is most important for you to see.
It's not the first time in my life graduating anything. You have support and then people helping you and have support in God, you can change too. That's all I gotta say.
It means like the world right now to him.
The first time I could say in my life, I'm a happy man. I lost a girl. She died. It's tearing me up right now. Instead of me talking about it, what I do, run to the beer. I'm sorry for that. When we got back to where we live at, there was nobody around I could talk. Yeah. This is gonna be my first room in years. This is from my baptism service. This is what I received today. I can call my spot to see how he's doing.
Is not available.
Try to call him, he's not home. Let's just see if I can reach somebody else.
He started drinking at 10. He's 63. He drank for 53 years.
She's not home right now, though. I know she's not home.
His battle is far from over. He told me he was ready to go home, back to the city of Camden, and be homeless again. That was hard. That was really hard.
It's not the ending that you expect. And I'll tell you that day when we were filming, and I still get emotional about it, you can tell, that we spend 6 months with him and we see all these men make all these sacrifices, and to find Bill drinking again was, heartbreaking and devastating to me, for his life. And but I knew we had to keep doing it. I had this feeling that the end of his story wasn't the graduation ceremony, that we needed to go back and find him settling in his room. And I think that we were meant to find his story this way and not just finish it with graduation and walk away from the bills of this world. And it's, I went home that night, I was so sad about it and was bawling my eyes out, actually, and didn't understand why God wanted me to do this story. And then as I started working on putting the story together, I realized how much power there really was in Bill's story. And that it's not for me to find stories with happy endings, but it's just my role to tell these stories as they actually happen. And there's a scripture I'd like to share with you. It's 2 Corinthians 3:2-3. And in it, Paul is urging believers to share their stories. You yourselves are our letters of recommendation, written on our hearts to one known and read by all. And you show that you are the letter from Christ, delivering to us, written not in ink, but the Spirit of the living God. You're not on stone tablets, but on tablets of human hearts. And anybody who's seen this documentary, this is the story that sticks with them. It's Bill's story. It's really the most powerful story. And so my appeal to you is to go and find the stories. I'm not asking you to go make a documentary film, but I'm asking you to go find the people who don't often speak, who are hiding in the back, and see if you can get to know them. Find their stories. Give them time. It may not happen the first time, the second, or the third time you spend time with them, but slowly help them see God's plan in their life and their story, and then ask them permission if you can share it, because usually that story needs to be heard by someone else. Thanks.
Wow. All right. Well, now we're going to have Cora Elmer come up and share a little bit of her perspective on things.
I believe that we're special, but we're better together. Let me tell you a story. Once I was at the music fest with my mom and her friend, and one table was full, and I had to sit with my mom's friend, and we were eating deep fried Oreos, and
Yeah, so first of all, what is Music Fest?
it's like a festival, like a state fair for Emmaus.
Yeah, okay. And so you were at a table.
And we were eating deep fried Oreos, and
And what was it like who were you at the table with?
my mom's friend.
Yeah, and how was that?
They were good, but they were not great.
Oh. Why not?
Because I wasn't with my family when I ate them. Oh. But then me and my aunt and my uncle made deep fried Oreos, and it was a lot more fun. And because we made it together, and we were eating them together, and we were laughing, and their dog ate like 3 because we dropped them.
Do you think that was good?
No, definitely not.
So what was different? You liked them better the second time?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I was with my family when I ate them.
Wow. So what makes you What can we learn from that?
That we're all special, but we're better when we are together.
Thanks. And then you had something with your teacher, right, that also made you think about this point? What was it?
That we're all different parts of one big picture that God made. Because when I was in music, my music teacher was talking, and she said that music is like a big picture, and each person works together to make that really beautiful.
Thanks. And you think about this a lot, don't you? You've been talking about this a lot at home. Thank you. Do you have something you want people to share with people?
Passing out Oreos?
Why? Should they go eat them alone in their car?
No.
Where should they eat them?
Here?
Together?
Yeah.
All right, good job, Cora. Okay, now we're going to bring up Jeff Cronin. Maybe you can snag an Oreo on your way up.
To enter stage right, even though I was on the left.
Everyone, buckle your seatbelts. We are in for a ride.
Nah, we're all right. But let the show begin. My name is Jeff Cronin. For those of you that don't know me, my full name is Jeffrey A. Cronin. And I have to tell you, the A stands for awesome. But for those of you who don't know, I was raised in an orphanage. Now, life in the orphanage, for me, was really terrific. There were 500 kids in that orphanage, so you always had someone to play with. But what would happen is that the results of living in the home kind of shaded my faith towards the Lord a little bit. But anyway, I'm a retired elevator mechanic. And matter of fact, I retired 28 years ago, which I was 50 years old, which ended up a truly great blessing because then I could go get any job that I wanted, and if I didn't like it, I could just quit. But I have a lovely bride, Louise. We've been married for 58 years. We have 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren, which are true blessings. So my relationship with God took that low ebb. Being raised in a Catholic boys' home, we would have to go to church about 200 days a year. And Mass at that time was in Latin. And believe me, I didn't understand, none of us really understood a single word of Latin. So as a result, for us, church was totally boring, and our thoughts were always to get outside and play. So, there's where the relationship with God kind of reached a low ebb. So at the early days of my time in the home, I had believed that I was a true orphan. Now at that time, we believed all the 500 kids in that home were orphans, and I was to find out later that very, very few were genuine orphans. And when I was about 10 years old, I was out in the yard, and I got a call over the loudspeaker, and that indicated that you had a visitor, and it surprised the living heck out of me. So anyway, I go to this great big hall, and there's this person calling my name, and every time I would look around as to who was calling my name, of course they would be quiet. So the person that was visiting was my birth mother. That was the first and last time she ever visited. But she was there with my brother, my older brother, Walt. So she proceeded to tell me why I was put in the home. And her reasoning was that she couldn't afford to keep me and a younger brother. And this younger brother of mine, my memories of him was at about 3 years old, piggybacking him around because he was partially blind. We got separated some, but that's another story. But anyway, my mother did bring me a toy, and it was a wind-up train set that was self-contained that ran on the metal. So after they left, I went back to the home, and the nun was there, and I had to give the toy to the nun because once you got a toy, you could play with it at the moment, but you were never allowed to play with it again. The nuns would take them and put them away, and then when they had benefactors come in, they would put these toys on display to show that these were the toys that they provided for the kids. But we were, as I say, never allowed to play with them. My life in the home for me, as I said, was really great. We referred to ourselves as homies. And this was long before homies became part of the vernacular that it is today. So I'm an original homie. So, but anyway, getting back to the home, when I was about 10 years old, the nuns had us clean out this file room so that they could paint it. And we had to take out the drawers on the file cabinets. And I happened, by grace, by the luck, and I think it was primarily the grace of God, I got to carry the file cabinet that began with C. So on the way to where we were storing them, I stopped and took a look to where my name was, and there was a card in there, and it was the reason that I was admitted to the home. And in there you'll see it's the cause of committing is that parents deserted. So when I saw that, it never really bothered me at the time, and it still doesn't today. I mean, it was just a fact of life that we were all living at that time. But years later, when the home closed, we got a hold of these file cabinets, and I was able to get this original card. And I was showing it to my children, and my daughter says, "You know, Dad, that's the closest thing to a permanent record that I have ever seen." But on there is a picture of me at just barely 9 years old. And damn, I was cute, wasn't I? But
Still are.
thank you. Are my flies open? Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, after a few years, when I got out of the home, I didn't go to church for several years. Then Louise and I got married, and we had 4 kids, as I say, and we had decided that we would go back to church. Well, the reasoning was that our children went to Catholic school. So at that time, Mass was still in Latin, but we went to church, and church was so boring that, but I attended anyway. And I think what I started to do was build a wall between me and the Lord. And after we had moved out to Chester County, we stopped going to church again. And the kids, of course, were in public school at that time, so we just didn't attend church. Then when I was about 50, we started to say, hey, we got to regain our spirituality. I had religion at the time, but I didn't have any spirituality. So we started looking around for churches, and we went to quite a few churches. And here I found that most of them the preachers were talking at you and not teaching you. So eventually we attended a church, and we attended it for about 2 years. Well, then in 2009, when I was 70 years old, oh, by the way, I'd like to give my age now like a kid would give it that's really pumped up. I'm 78 and a half years old. But, thank you. But anyway, I attended this church, and we were there for about 2 years. And one day the preacher says to bow our heads. And while we had our heads bowed, he said, if any of you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, raise your hand. And I raised my hand, and really significant moment for me. But, you know, I haven't been a good Christian, a really good Christian, but I must try, and try I'm going to adhere to my Christian roots. So we attended that church for 2 years, and we left again, and we called Steve Grubb, and that's the reason I'm here, so you can blame him. But we called him to see about the vineyard, and we attended, and my first impression of the Vineyard Church was the depth of the faith of the people here, their knowledge of the Bible, and their willingness to share their faith with others. And it put me in awe, and believe me, I'm still in awe today of most of you people. You know, it's amazing. So looking back on my life, if I had to do everything all over, knowing what I know today and what is going to transpire in my life, believe me, I would do it exactly the same way again, because it's been a true, true blessing for me. So I know this is real short, thank God, and I'd like to read from the Bible that best exemplifies my feelings on what the Lord has done for me. And it's from Psalms, Psalm 100, and it's a psalm of thanksgiving. Shout with joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him singing with joy. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Go into his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good. His unfailing love continues forever, and his faithfulness continues to each generation. Thank you.